We are live on a Wednesday. I am Rich Lieberman, and this is a special report here on YouTube, the Bay Area Media Pulse. Now, what I'm about to tell you is something that I have known for years now, and I am trying to be fair. I'm trying to be dignified, and I'm trying to give out information that is now is now my duty, and not to sound righteous, to report to you, because there is now various reports circulating about Frank Somerville. Now, as most of you know, I've had Frank on my show, 2 interviews, and I knew about the relationship with his daughter. I didn't know to the extent that resulted in a physical altercation, a fight that took place on Monday. Now, as all of you know, I had planned to have Frank on my show for the third time on Tuesday morning to be exact. And that didn't happen. I got a text from Frank late Monday evening saying that something had happened, that there was a personal issue that he had to take care of, and that we were to reschedule, which was fine. I had no inclination to think that there was something onerous taking place or had taken place. But indeed, something really bad happened. And look, folks, this has been an ongoing situation. It's one of the reasons why I think Frank, who himself, without this latest news, without this latest accounts of him being in an altercation with not only his brother, his younger brother, and his father, who long ago lost faith in him, but now his daughter. Now, this is his adopted daughter, Callie, who was one of Frank's closest confidants, beyond just a normal daughter-father relationship. He took her many a times out and about. He took her to Sharks games down in San Jose. He often took her out to various, social evenings and so forth. And I'm trying to word this correctly because I want to make it clear that I've known this for a while, and I decided not to go with it because there was no reason to go with it. But now there is evidence out there. There has been widespread accounts as to the fact that they had a physical altercation, which is very unfortunate, but not really surprised from here that this took place. But Frank, remember, back in May of 22, was going through a divorce, was then having initial issues with his adopted daughter, Callie, which, by the way, was broken. The story that he was adopting young Callie about 15 years ago was broke right here at 415 Media, if you must know. And throughout the years, Callie, who went to public school in Oakland, was having issues, as sometimes teenagers are wont to do. And Frank, being the father, was dealing with all of this and dealing with it and about to be divorce involving his wife, Donna, and just the start of his professional situation at KTVU being affected. Now, I want to make very, very clear, folks, I am in no way suggesting that these incidents are a defense for Frank and his behavior. That's Frank's area. Some people can handle internal pressure. some people cannot. Obviously, the divorce with Donna, the tumultuous relationship with his daughter, who I know was smoking marijuana, and it became chronic and it became lengthy to a point where he had a problem. And quite frankly, he didn't know how to handle it. And quite frankly, there is a time where you don't know what to do. Now, mind you, this is a guy, 31 years at KTVU, veteran Bay Area anchor. And what could he do? Well, he could have sought counseling. He could have done a number. He could have sought professional help. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud. But I do know that this was a situation that brought forth the worst in Frank Somerville's behavior. It may have even led to the eventual demise of his career. I want to emphasize again, I am not defending his behavior. I'm not. Some people, again, can handle it. Some people cannot. Frank, mind you, had 31 years at KTVU. But as these intense domestic issues began to percolate in his life, he obviously did not know how to go about it. Mind you, it wasn't just the divorce, which in and of itself was tumultuous. The daughter, Callie, and her battles, and her ultimate battle with her father. But Frank also had a very, very, very tumultuous relationship with his younger brother and his father in Berkeley, which led to one of his arrests. And you know the rest is history. But the situation with Callie is a lot more tense, a lot more tumultuous, and who knows what's going to happen. I, as an individual who's had him on the air, who had planned to interview him on Tuesday, and to find out literally not just about his own situation, but to talk about the news business, talk about his former employer, KTVU, and to talk about anchoring in general, which is what we were going to get into. I had no idea that, although I had a good hunch, because over the last several months, there were issues, there were times where he was having difficulty dealing with his adopted daughter, which ultimately has maybe cost him complete 100% respite from his dream to get back into the business. And he'd been making improvements. He insisted to me, and he's insisted to others via his Facebook writings, that he'd kicked the habit of drinking booze. He wasn't a heavy-duty, hard liquor drinker. He was drinking mostly beer. It was the recreational drugs, the Xanax, the tranquilizers that got him into trouble. And now we all know why, that he was having these issues, these very, very pronounced domestic issues. And now I worry about Frank Somerville, and I'm not taking sides. I don't know exactly what happened other than he had a physical fight with his daughter. You see the scars on his face. I haven't seen pictures of Callie. I don't know about her condition. I will assume that she's not in any kind of danger, but it doesn't look good. It doesn't smell good. to use a phrase. And, what could he have done? Well, he could have called the cops early on and said, look, I have a problem. It would have been difficult. It would have been something unusual. It would have been something, frankly, out of the blue, but not really out of the blue, given the fact that they have had battles. Don't know for sure, nobody knows. Only Frank and his daughter know that it reached this epic point where now this could be his ultimate undoing. You might say, well, he was already done. There's no way he was going to work again. I've spoken to many, many people, not just in the last 24 hours, but beyond that said to me that he could have perhaps, with time, assuming that his position, that he cleaned up his life, that he was continuing to get help, that his legal battles were mostly in the past tense, and that he continued not to drink and deal with his life and get beyond this. There was a chance, folks, and this I know firsthand, that he could eventually show up in another market, maybe working again in a very, very, very small way, perhaps even in California. I had many times mentioned Sacramento, where I do know there was interest, not heavy duty, nothing official, but that there was interest. I know for a fact of a well-known, I'm not going to mention the name, a well-known TV news exec in the Bay Area who wanted to see Frank, not necessarily for employment right away, but to monitor Frank's condition, to monitor, to see if he can maintain his turn away from booze and from drugs, other drugs, keep himself clean, and maybe over time they talk, and who knows what could happen. Now, there was no job offer on the table, nothing like that. I keep saying, I've been told by many execs that he was through anyway from working in Cal, at least in the Bay Area. That was a given. Companies these days, they don't want to deal with liability, most especially a high-profile job like a TV news anchor, even though Frank was and is a very talented guy. And it's a shame. It's a rotten shame. Sarcastically, no. Sort of selfishly, I'll say this. It's a shame that Frank could not get himself together and preserve his stay away from trouble, to come back into the arena, the public arena, and to begin anchoring again. If not here, if not Sacramento, maybe somewhere else, maybe in another market, maybe out of state. And I say that, folks, with a understanding that he was battling, and this I can tell you now because it's somewhat in the public domain right now. Frank didn't just one day say, I'm going to go out and start drinking. I myself, before all of this happened, I'm not just talking about the latest arrest with Callie. When I was going through serious drama and personal turmoil myself, dealing with lots of deaths in my own family, my mother, back about 5 years ago, I relied on Frank as a friend who I had known since college days at San Francisco State. He's 6 years older than me. But I knew right away, I said, wait a minute, this guy's good. This guy's going to be damn good. He had that look. He had that staccato. He had that it factor that I often talk about on my shows with regards to anchoring and being a news person and having chops and all of that. And sure enough, about 35 years ago, he is popping up on KTVU, the Fox owned and operated station in the Bay Area. And when Dennis Richmond ultimately retired, I knew the Fox execs and KTVU execs had their mindset. We don't need to look around for a number one anchor. We don't need to go outside the market and find somebody. We have our ace right here, Frank Somerville. Frank was good. He was solid. I used to say, hey, Frank, you remind me of Ron Burgundy with brains. Ron Burgundy, of course, the character name from Anchorman, the Will Ferrell franchise about Anchorman, that kind of a deal. Only Frank was a real person. Frank wasn't a character, but Frank aided me. We'd have beers together, something I've kept in the past because I didn't want to say anything, and I'm not jeopardizing anything here, folks, because his damage was already done. But Frank and I would go have beers. Oftentimes, he'd come out of the station at KTVU, Channel 2, 6 o'clock. And I want to make it clear, he wasn't drinking heavy-duty stuff. He never has. We spoke about it when I've interviewed him here in my studio at the house. People saying, well, how could this guy jeopardize his career? How could he do all of that stuff? Well, he did it. But he was drinking beer. That wasn't the problem. It was the other things, the drugs. And amongst the biggest reasons why he was taking those tranquilizers, like a Xanax type of a deal, was that he was facing drama in his own life. And that is a divorce, his own battles. You have the situation with his daughter now, and I'll get back to that in a second. But Frank couldn't sleep. Frank had an immense amount of shit going on in his own life. I just mentioned the main things. And he couldn't deal with it. So he couldn't sleep. So he turned to Ambien. Remember that? That was the first hint that he was having issues. And he was drinking beer. And it became obvious that he could not deal with it. And the drama with his wife, and the drama with the divorce, he lost half of his house. Again, that's all monetary shit. That stuff doesn't matter. The personal things. I've held back talking about this. I knew what was taking place, not everything, and I didn't want to dwell into all of this. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to keep repeating this till I'm blue in the face. I do not defend Frank, although you could defend him in certain arenas and make the case that Frank didn't know how to deal on using past tense just to be past it, not in any way, shape, or form trying to say anything or do anything. I see now the chat room here is heating up here, and I'd be happy to answer any and all as much as I can. But let's just say this. I don't think Frank has any iota of want to hurt anybody, and he's the only person that he hurt now, apparently. I don't know the status of his daughter, is Frank has hurt himself, and he's kissed away his career. And frankly, I'm disturbed by all this. I have worries, and I don't say this lightly. So take this or don't take this with a grain of salt. I worry about Frank now because Callie was the only thing left for him to care about in a personal situation. His daughter, his adopted daughter, his biological daughter, whom he had a right, largely has stayed with his ex-wife, Donna. And I think Frank, in his own mind, and I still do believe this, Callie represented to him independence and somebody that he can obviously call his own daughter and taking her to hockey games and taking her out and about. Oftentimes, we used to make arrangements for him to come on my show, but it always was, of course, based upon his willingness to come on and talk about anything on, and any question was not off the table. As I said to him, and he agreed. You saw him here. If you haven't seen the interviews, then Google my name and Frank Somerville, and you'll see the interviews. This is a big story, and I'm addressing it now because it's not only reached the local level, but now it's national again. And the TMZ and the New York Post did an article today. And I am coming on here to give you a perspective that perhaps you're not going to get, because I haven't spoken to Frank since a couple days ago. We texted. He oftentimes comes on here and comments on various news issues and all that. He has a reverence for social media, which he obviously talked about his latest travails on Facebook. And look, sometimes in anger and desperation on my own level and frustration, I said to Frank, stay the hell away from social media. Get your life together, which for the most part, he has. Now, I don't monitor him, obviously, 24/7. He lives in a downtown Oakland condo, and he works out religiously. And he is largely, without knowing this 100%, I can tell you, he has largely stayed away from alcohol. The other drugs, I can't say anything because obviously I'm not there. But his daughter means a lot to him. And although this latest development doesn't look good, and I don't know the absolute 100% specifics because I didn't comment, I didn't reach out to Frank initially because of all this, his legal situation, the fact that he's still on probation and all that. I didn't want to pile on. And I don't say that self-servingly. Okay. I know a lot of these other news organizations, they've given you the details, but not the true details because they haven't had him on. They've called him, like the Chronicle, late to the story once again. The Mercury News had the initial story, as did Cron. And there's another side story to that. The TV news stations, other than Cron, which have basically ignored this whole story. I have my own reasoning there, which I'm not going to get into now. But here's the deal, folks. I worry about Frank. I worry that now that his daughter has entered into this quagmire, and it is a quagmire. I don't know her condition. I hope to God that she doesn't have marks on her body. But I do know that she did have, and now it's again into the public domain about her marijuana use. I do know that was a problem, a big problem. Now, Frank could have called the cops or anyone said, look, I've got my own issues here. My daughter is in a very, very precarious situation. What do I do? Something of CYA mode to cover himself up. Not cover himself up. Cover his you-know-what, so to speak. Which did not happen. And I want to say this. Again, not taking sides. Don't assume 100% wrongdoing by Frank. He may have been involved with it in a situation which his daughter wanted money, as you probably have read, so she can go get marijuana or what have you. She may have asked him, her dad, innocently for some money, and then shit began to unfurl. I don't know. I'm not saying I was a witness to this fracas, but I know Frank. I know Frank pretty well. And sometimes Frank doesn't, frankly, know how to handle situations like this. And I'm not piling on Frank. I'm giving you another side. I worry about Frank because he is somewhat emotionally turbulent. I mentioned the fact that this is his closest daughter, somewhat, even though she's, well, not even though, she's his adopted daughter. They care a lot. I still think there are people out there who want to vilify Frank for anything, that he's been given a lot of chances, which he has. But we have to wait. I've reached out to Frank myself now. I have. I texted him. I asked him if he's okay. Your normal response. I consider him somewhat of a friend. I'm not that close, but close enough to have had him on here in this very room, the studio where I do this show. And a lot of you have seen my interview, the first one, the second one. He doesn't do many interviews. He did an interview for me. And frankly, he answered a lot of what I thought were tough questions. And he seemed to be making progress. Forget the anchoring part now. Progress to getting himself clean, getting himself better, getting himself in an emotional state where he can get over all this shit. Obviously, that situation has taken a turn for the worse for now. Now, why am I on here? Ultimately, again, why am I here right now? I'm here right now because I worry about Frank, and I worry, frankly, and this is a heavy-duty word, folks. I worry about Frank hurting himself. I have to say that because Frank is not that good at kind of insulating a lot of this. And I can see, this is just my opinion, in his mindset that it's not only his professional life now, it's his personal life. He's estranged from his wife. They talk. In fact, it was he who called his wife and made the urge that Callie go over and see his wife, Donna. And Donna then got freaked out. And now his world, his personal world, is upside down. Forget the professional world right now. Frank, monetarily, did he need to go back into anchoring? No. He's got plenty of money, got half of the sale of their house up in the Oakland Hills. He's got a pension from Fox. He's okay in that arena. It's the personal stuff. His daughter, whom he loves dearly. And I, for the life of me, call me naive, can't imagine how an actual physical fight took place. So, from that standpoint, I don't know what the hell happened. And he has not answered, and I don't think he's gone into detail about what actually happened. We know that there was an altercation. She needed money to go, apparently, want to go buy some weed. And I worry about Frank now. I do. And in fact, if some of you out there, or might be local, I know a lot of you on this chat line now on Facebook are local, or some of you are not local. Maybe you might have watched Channel 2 in the past and know about the legacy that Frank, revolved around. He was the number one guy at KTVU, number one in the Bay Area, one of the highest paid anchors in the market. Good. Very, 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 very talented guy, which makes all of this in a very lesser degree. We're not talking about human lives and all that, that's far more important. But on a professional standpoint, all of this is such a damn shame that this drama has cost him his career. Okay, wipe that aside. His personal situation right now, folks, is really, really tense. And I just hope to God that those people, he doesn't have a very large family. His relationship with his younger brother is quite fragile. The father, same thing. He has a pretty good relationship with his ex-wife, Donna. And of course, I've talked to you about his adopted daughter, whom he's had this fight with, Hallie. And that's a damn shame that this has all evolved into a new chapter that's quite unpleasant, and actually quite disturbing to hear about and to read about. This is the ultimate stance of personal will and what do I do now kind of a thing. So I will, if you have any questions, I will try to be as open as possible. Some of the things, if I can answer, I will answer. Some things that I can't talk about, which, I pretty much divulged my thoughts here. But I will try to be as transparent as possible myself, because this is now a major news story that has now got national type of prominence. New York Post, TMZ, both the local papers here, KRON television. I'm going to go down here and see if I can. There's not many questions. They need a lot of therapy, of course, from Vicky. Rich, you are being a good friend, and I think your concerns are valid. Okay, Vicky. And I don't mean to sound pompous, folks. A little background. When I knew Frank when I was a freshman at SF State. Frank went to San Francisco State. Grew up in Berkeley, Berkeley High grad. I went to Skyline in Oakland. I met Frank as a freshman. He was a senior, I believe, about 6 years apart. We were in a journalism class, radio TV, at San Francisco State. And I was sitting next to him, and he could attest to this, hopefully one day when we're all over this shit. I said to him, man, you're going to be a star. And for whatever it meant, as not literally a star, you know what I mean? I said, this guy's going to be great. But a couple of years later, he's working at KTVU in some capacity. I think he was an intern. I think he got the morning gig. He became kind of like a fill-in anchor, worked on mornings on 2 for like 20 years. And then Dennis Richmond, the tenured anchor, star anchor of KTVU, retired in May of 2008. And like I said earlier, Frank was the guy that would replace Dennis. And KTVU ratings, which were already good, were soaring even further. They had their guy. And he and Julie Hayner, who used to be his co-anchor, and then Bill Martin was the weather anchor, and Marky Banyas, whom himself was a long veteran tenured anchor on sports at Channel 2. That foursome, the fearsome foursome, as I called it, the core four, was a very, very powerful, popular, masterful KTVU machine. It was a legacy newscast called the 10 o'clock news. Now, they had quite a deal of success before that, but Frank assumed the role that Dennis left when he retired in May 2008, and people said, "Oh my God, this guy. He looks like an anchor, talks like an anchor, knows his craft, very, very smart guy, excellent interviewer, and all that." And he became the number one anchor in the Bay Area. He did. And you know, all out of the blue, May 2022, Memorial Day weekend, the Monday, actual Memorial Day, he has this spasm, which all of you pretty much saw. He looked incoherent. He sounded slurred. His voice was weird. His speech was slurred. And, 10 minutes, newscast opens. 10 minutes later, he's off the air, and he's, as they say again, the rest is history, which I talked about here and you all saw. And then another controversial moment at KTVU where he was talking about some incident involving that kidnapped young lady who ultimately was murdered, and then, set forth a debate among, white girls and blondes, especially getting coverage on news regarding kidnapped young ladies. That set off a fracas. He was suspended, eventually got back on the air again at Channel 2. And then, of course, New Year's Eve day in 2022, he was in his car, drunk, and arrested, TWI. Ugly situation. We all thought it was over again, and he was relatively clean, folks, for the last couple of years. I want to state this, I don't know 100%, but I knew Frank well enough to where I believed him, and he was working out. He was a fervent physical guy with the abs and all that. He used to work out right across the street from where he lived in downtown Oakland. And I thought, and talked about it here, that if he stayed clean with time, maybe he could get back into the business. I was a little naive because the internet can make you and it can destroy you and all that. So I want to again repeat, because I know a lot of you are in and out and the way these shows are. I'm doing this as a special report because I truly hope that my word gets out there, and that my overall spiel here is I worry about Frank and his ability or inability in this case to deal with this latest thing, because this involves his own personal family. Not that they weren't affected, nor, dealing with his own travails, which I'm sure they were. But now this is something which is now public. The idea that he had an altercation, a physical fight with his daughter, Callie, and the circumstances which have made the public domain. And that is Frank's universe, is Callie. And I'm concerned as a friend, not a close friend, but close enough, that Frank could hurt himself. And I said it, and if it's interpreted as overly alarming, well, then so be it. I'd rather be on the side of caution, because Frank doesn't know how to handle, not all, but a lot of situations like this. He doesn't know how to handle situations like this. And I'm concerned about his well-being. And I've reached out to him, asked him how he's doing and all that. And look, he's got a lot of things on his mind, with lawyers and court, relatives, and you know, I just want to make sure that he's okay. And I'm not saying, you know, hey, cops, do a well check, but I'm hoping twofold that I give you guys a little enlightenment on this whole thing, a perspective without sounding maudlin or without sounding self-righteous, which inevitably somebody will go that route because this is the world in which we live in today. Everybody's got an angle, everybody wants to cash in. I ain't cashing in. I'm doing this as I see it, a public service. Okay? And you want to vilify me for that, so be it. I feel for Frank. I also feel for his daughter. Again, I don't know the entire situation. I don't know the entire circumstances. When things like that take place, proper perspective is often overlooked, and you just don't know what the hell you're doing. So I'm not leaving. I just want to let you guys know if you have questions, you can text me. You can also ask me questions here on the super chat line here on Facebook. I'm Rich Lieberman. This is the Bay Area Media Pulse. We are live on this Wednesday afternoon, a very, very, tough day, frankly, to talk about all of this, which I assumed was on the back burner and was hoping that Frank was going to be doing as well as I had thought, many of you, but really me personally. Just a quick a reminder. Frank was to be on my show yesterday at 10 o'clock, my local time, to talk about everything. And get a text late Monday evening, he couldn't make it. Something had happened, personal issue, which was fine. Didn't think anything of it. And then, like all of you, I find out what happened. Like, oh my God, told people. I didn't plug it, didn't promote it, as I often do, because, these things sometimes change, especially with people that are somewhat in, certain situations. Didn't have any inclination whatsoever of something like this until, I saw the initial report. And he didn't give me any tip off either, like, other than to say there was a personal issue and, the rest is history. If you want to text me, 415-999, it's 394454. You could do it that way, or you can chime in here on the text line. You can also email me at rich.lieberman, Lieberman at gmail.com. I'll go to some of you folks in the super chat. Understand this too. I will answer any questions. I can't answer certain questions if I even know. I have to make sure that I can say what I can say. Okay. I'm coming out now because it's now in the open public domain. And I'm not speaking ill of Frank. I'm not defending him. I keep having to say this because I don't want this to be interpreted as defending him. I explained to you guys how in that sort of circumstance that perhaps he didn't know what he was dealing with. I believe him when he said he wasn't drinking at the time or taking any kind of, tranquilizers or what have you. I believe him. But who am I to say what frame of mind he was in when you get into a situation like that, and when there's emotional steam and anger and frustration, especially with a family member, albeit an adopted daughter here. I know someone whom he admires and loves, part of his camaraderie, his all of that. So I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm trying to give some clarity and perhaps offer a perspective that you have not got on these various articles. because they don't know what the hell is going on. They're basing their opinion and their story. It's not really an opinion. I should retract that. Their article based on just, records and cops and that kind of a thing. So take that into account. I'm going to go over here, Vicky, again. Let's see. Thanks. Who could help intervene? His ex-wife, Donna. I'm sure she has. I would assume that she has, Vicky. Who else is here? Sherry. I think everyone is afraid to say anything about Owens because his daughter will come after. Okay, that's a Ron Owens question. That's a comment. I'm not vilifying or criticizing Sherry. It's just that I don't know how to answer that, or even Sherry and Vicky are great names. Okay. Fast. Is that your name? Afternoon. Right? Afternoon to you. So and look, folks, I have no way to, say, when I say Frank, I worry about Frank, that he could harm himself. I base that purely on gut instinct because, and I've been in a situation not like this, but of my own travails with family and a brother, my late brother, rest in peace, Mike, who passed away much too soon due to drugs primarily. Miss him dearly. We had very physical encounters and drama, and it involved my mother. It extended to outward relationships, directly or indirectly. So I know this whole thing can get very heated and very turbulent, to say the least. And so I just worry that Frank, who sometimes sees the world in a little bit of a different manner than you and I, can feel a great degree of helplessness. So, anyway, and I hope that some of people like Donna take that into account and make sure that he's okay. And look, do I know everything? No. I know what you know now. I know that there was an exchange that became violent, involved physical violence, and, you've seen pictures of him where he has bruises on his face. He was on Facebook. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but I would not have told him or advised him to go to Facebook. But as many of you know, he often does. He talks and speaks out on issues, including his own personal issues sometimes. But in this matter, I would have stayed away. Just my opinion. That's all. So if you have a question or two, and I'm going to, see how this chat evolves here and maybe take a break and come back later. So I'll post on my social media a time when I'll be back. Again, if you have a question and you want to call me or text me, 415-999, that's 3 9s, 4454, and I'll give you my best answer. And if it's something I can't answer, I will tell you. If it's something that I know but is maybe sensitive and all that, of course, you'll understand, I hope. And I'll tell you that I can't answer that. But I've been pretty open here and thought that you weren't getting a whole lot if you just read the stories that have come about online. So now it's New York Post has a story. I know there's an international story, that's probably about to take or to occur, if it hasn't already, in one of the British tabloids. This is a big story because it involves somebody very much a celebrity, good or bad, somebody very much noted in a major market and a major player, and that was what Frank Somerville was. Whether he likes it or not, he knows about it, all that kind of stuff. So for now, to all of you, just go up to Twitter and watch me, and I'll make an announcement either way. I hope I've been able to give you something on this latest incident, and we'll talk later on. Just again, when I get more information, I will let you know. Just for the record, once again, I've reached out to Frank, who perhaps is not able to now talk much from a legal standpoint, but nevertheless, if he wants to, somebody out there knows him in another manner or capacity, may want to talk and say what he could say. If he wants to come here, he knows, of course, how to get in touch with me. Anyway, okay. Wednesday afternoon, evening for some of you. Thank you for watching me. If you want to get further industrious news and all that with regards to local, national, and international news coverage, commentary, and discussion, become a subscriber to my YouTube channel here. And you have my social media addresses. Thanks for watching, and we will most definitely see you later. I'm Rich Lieberman. Take care.